Hello, Thought Roomies, and welcome back to the Thought Room with Hallie Rose. Hey, that's me, Hallie Rose. I'm your host. And I'm so excited to be back in my hometown of Austin, Texas. If you've been following along, you know that for the last 3 months, I was in a period of deep introspection in the woods in Canada, squirreled away in a cabin. And I'm not going to lie. It was a very, very challenging time. And I feel that now as I return to my regular daily rhythm and routine, I'm really starting to see and integrate all of the lessons that came from that deep period of inner work. And I know that I'm going to have a lot to share with you in the upcoming weeks and in some upcoming solo episodes about my dances with anger and sadness and creativity and all sorts of juicy stories and bits that I want to share with you. So if you're not already subscribed to this show, go ahead and do that right now so that you can stay up to date with everything that's going on. And if you haven't already done so, shameless little plug here for you to leave a review on Apple Podcasts for us, even if you are a Spotify listener or listening somewhere else on YouTube. If you have an iPhone, please go take a second and leave us a short review. It really means the world. And the more reviews we have, the magical algorithms of the interwebs seem to be connecting us with more and more people. So think about it that way. This small little moment that you take could actually magnetize more people to this podcast to hear these messages. So not only does it make my ego that lives inside this meat suit feel very good when we hear from all of you, it also could genuinely help others to find this show. So I'd appreciate if you have a moment and you haven't done so already, please leave us a short review. We'll leave the link to make it super easy in the show notes. It's like a one-click thing. You can type it out and hit the button and it's done. So thank you very much in advance for all of you who are about to do that right now. I know you are. Thank you. I love you. This week I had my friend James McCrae on the podcast. His Instagram is the ever popular account for poetry and memes. Words are vibrations. 2 days ago, I actually got to have dinner with a group of friends and James as we celebrated his book launch. His book just came out this month. It's called How to Laugh in Ironic Amusement During Your Existential Crisis. It's a poetry and meme book. It's not his first book, but it is definitely his newest book. And it's very pithy. It's very funny. It makes the perfect side table book or like bathroom book or a gift. It's got this amazing holographic cover, which I just was telling James is so cool. I need to copy that idea if I put my book out someday. And today we get into so many cool topics. We get into James's creative process. How did he go about publishing his first book and the miraculous synchronistic story of how that happened? He went from, essentially a air quote nobody to having his book published by Hay House, which is an incredibly prestigious publishing company with absolutely no following when he began. How on earth did he do that? He tells the story today. We talk about aliens. We talk about internet memes. And overall, this is just a really fun, playful conversation with a dear friend. I know you're going to love it. Please, as always, let us know. We love when you tag us on Instagram, when you share screenshots, when you share the podcast. People, our handles are at Hallie, HALLIE _Rosebud, at Words Are Vibrations, and at Thought Room Podcast. So thank you so much. I love you. Let's step into the thought room with James McCrae. James McCrae, welcome to the Thought Room. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you. This is amazing.
I know. We were just saying it's currently 3:33 p.m. A little God wink, a little angel nod there for us with the sacred numerology, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit because I know that's a thing of yours. But I was trying to remember, where did we meet?
So, ever since I moved to Austin, which is like 6 months ago now, I've been having so many random magical encounters, either through the internet or in person. And I believe that you were the first one that I had because I think I had just arrived. And a couple days later, I think we connected on Instagram randomly.
Mm-hmm.
And then we had made plans to meet up. But before that could happen, I think we ran into each other randomly at a coffee shop.
Oh, yeah. I think I remember this now. It was like we were at Radio Coffee.
Yeah.
And I saw you out of the corner of my eye. I was like, why am I being magnetized toward that person? It was that feeling of they look very familiar to me. And I was trying not to stare at you because I didn't want to be weird, or maybe I did. But and then I believe you called out my name, and I thought I was going insane.
Yeah.
I was like, who is calling Hallie Rose? And then it was you. And I walked over. I still wasn't sure who you were.
Yeah.
And you're like, it's James. And I was like, still just
No,
pausing.
I think I said, I know you from Instagram. And you're like, I know lots of people from Instagram. And I'm like, fair.
Well, I didn't mean
fair.
to sound like that, but it's like, there's a lot of people out there.
But it's just funny because it was like, I found Austin to be such an easy place to meet people.
Right.
But I think you were actually the first person that I just randomly ended up meeting.
Right. Yeah. So you were like, it's James. And I was just like, still not cluing in. You're like, words are vibrations on Instagram. And I was like, oh, dude, how are you? And then we sat and I think we talked about poetry.
We had an impromptu poetry reading at the coffee shop.
Yeah, we started to you had your laptop, I pulled out my phone, and we were just like poetry slamming with each other. Yeah, what a cool way to meet.
Amazing first hang, yeah.
Yeah, so first question I want to ask you is like, what's most alive in you right now? Like when you arrived today, sitting on these cushions in my living room with me, what's most prominent at the tip of your heart?
I've been meditating on the idea of surrender.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm finally starting to understand what self-care is. Because I feel like obviously people have been talking about self-care for a few years now in a really serious way in like the wellness and spiritual communities.
Mm-hmm.
And I always acknowledged it and understood it and like appreciated it.
Mm-hmm.
But I realized that I was treating myself okay, but I'm now fully realizing like what self-care is to me and nurturing my soul.
So what
kind of
is
first
self-care?
And foremost.
Yeah, what is self-care to you? And maybe juxtapose it with like what you assumed it was before you fully understood it for yourself.
Mm-hmm. I guess I didn't think I really needed it. I think I was probably kind of like, I'm kind of thawing from this long period of living primarily inside my own head and experiencing the world intellectually.
I don't know anything about that.
Yeah,
man.
right. Overthinking. Like I was a professional strategist for many years.
Wow.
So I was like literally my job was to strategize and think. And so I understood like intellectually that like self-care is taking care of yourself. Good. And I'm like, I'm actually pretty fine. Like my trauma is relatively subtle, compared to a lot of people. So I just thought like I'm pretty good without these like rituals or whatever people do.
Right.
I don't need a bubble bath.
Right. I don't need face masks and bubble baths.
Yeah. And like if I want to drink some booze and stuff, like I can do that. Like I'm good. Like I got this,
Right.
And I'm just starting to kind of like unthaw from that mental paradigm and opening myself up more to the body and feeling and embodying in my own place in the world. And I'm realizing that's like there's a lot of self-care is really just prioritizing your soul and your bodily and spiritual needs above everything, because I think that it's so easy to think that we need to do certain things to live up to the social expectations. And
Mhm.
like, I need to work hard, I need to do this, I need to do that. And you're putting an emphasis on the external.
Mm.
And right now, for me, self care is just acknowledging that that's a story, that's a narrative. And it's kind of the prevailing narrative in our society
Mm.
as, Americans. But we don't have to choose that narrative. And actually, when we say, I'm going to prioritize my own sense of well-being and
Yeah.
safety and security, and like, I want my own like feeling of well-being and security is the most important thing. And then what happens when you do that is you realize that you give you create space for blessings to flow into your life, as
Mm.
opposed to trying to chase after things and hustle and struggle to achieve certain goals. You can actually slow down and like find a new vibrational frequency to exist in.
Mhm.
And in doing so, you enter a relationship with the universe where you're actually gifted with insights and blessings that would not have come if you were too busy hustling to notice them or to pick up on them.
Totally. I feel like partly this message is for me right now, what you're talking about, because I can definitely tell with myself when I'm a little bit off, like just kind of falling out of alignment a little bit. And for me, it shows up like a sense of tumbling into the next moment, rushing toward the next to-do list item, and it becomes just this manic chase toward nothing. And I can see it. Like part of me is like, this doesn't feel good. But it's really hard to break that cycle, at least the first time, and snap yourself out of it. And I have a funny little story about same as you. It was like when I first heard the term like self-care Sunday or whatever people were doing. I thought, okay, there's people Instagramming themselves in the bathtub with face masks on and like a bottle of wine that they're just drinking right out of the bottle. Like, okay, self-care. For me, what self-care is becoming is like, don't be an asshole to yourself. Don't be an asshole to yourself. And that can mean self-care can mean your inner talk.
100%.
Are you speaking with yourself in a kind voice? And so my funny little story is this morning I was on the phone with my assistant, Nick. His official title is the director of awesomeness at Thought Room Podcast and HallieRose.com. And we share my Google Calendar schedule. And he was laughing because this Sunday I have the whole day blocked off. And I actually created an event for this in my calendar just from the moment I wake up to the moment I go to bed. And it says, do nothing, period. You worked a lot this week. And like that's the title of the event I've scheduled for myself and blocked off. And he was laughing and being like, I love that you did that. So that's me. That's my little way of like practicing self-care.
Yeah. And even like I found myself this week, like even getting caught up in the busyness, of self care. Like I've got like a million videos to watch that are like part of like courses that I'm in.
Mm-hmm.
And I've got like a million books that I'm reading.
What courses are you in right now?
I'm just taking some like random ones. Like I was just like certain things just pop up in my life and I just choose to take them.
Such as?
So like there is this course called Awakening the Magician.
Sweet.
Yeah, it's actually before I lived in Austin, I lived in LA, and there's this amazing institution there called the Philosophical Research Center. And it was started by Manly P. Hall, who is just this wizard and guru and an expert on esoteric teachings. He wrote a phenomenal book called The Secret Teachings of All the Ages.
Sweet.
And it's like this big book, and it's like this kind of like encyclopedia of esoteric wisdom. And it's pretty phenomenal. And he started this research center in LA where he lived, and they have amazing events and programs and things like that. So I just signed up for that randomly. So I'm watching videos and doing meditations about awakening the wizard.
Mm.
And a friend recently gifted me into her course for it's a men's tantra course,
Excellent.
and that's just getting started now.
Sweet.
So it's just like there's always like new videos to watch, and there's always new books to read, and there's always new podcasts to listen to, and there's always more writing to do. So even when you're doing things that are quote unquote healthy and spiritual, there's still a certain amount of doing and busyness associated with them. So even this week, I've been like, I've got to rush to consume all my healthy content, right? But in doing so, you're missing the point of like you're rushing.
Totally.
You're doing self-care from a mindset in a place of busyness and stress, and like I have to accomplish these things, and it's not fun then. So even then, you have to take a step back and be like, okay, this isn't helping me right now. This isn't putting me at ease. So I'm just going to give myself space to sit out in the sun and just feel the sun on my face.
Everyone wants to know this, what we're talking about right now, the nuance between enabling yourself, right, with not doing those things. So say we're talking about working out, which is a self-care thing, and it takes a great deal of energy. If you're rushing around, busy doing all these things, it's probably going to help you de-stress, but also you got to get in the car, get to the gym. So it's like, how do we energetically distinguish whether we are being driven by a sense of enabling ourselves and avoidance, or if we're getting in touch with the soul and this deeply compassionate, understanding part of ourselves that really knows the next step? Like, how do we do that? What does it sound like, in your opinion?
Yeah, for me right now, it's just about being in flow as much as possible and letting, I'm not a very good planner, and I don't like planning. And
As a former strategist, I find that hard to believe.
I know, right? I don't like it, and I'm not particularly good at it. So I kind of enter like a flow state by default because it's just the path of least resistance, and anything that feels too forced or contrived, it just doesn't feel like good in my body. So for me, it's like the mind is tricky because obviously like it's through like the mind that we can experience like intuition and certain types of guidance and wisdom. But the mind is also has a million voices, whether it's voices in society, voices from your childhood, your own negative self-talk. So I'm always just have a healthy degree of suspicion from ideas that I get mentally through the mind. And I'm in the process of trusting how my energy feels and how my body feels. And just kind of like going with that flow, even if it doesn't seem like the most productive thing. Listening to the physical animal human being that needs a hug sometimes.
Totally. So how on earth did you go from being an analyst or a strategist rather, sorry. Were you in LA or New York or?
I was a strategist primarily in New York City.
Okay.
And Minneapolis.
So you're this corporate strategist in New York City. How do you go from that to basically being Instagram famous for poetry and memes? Like spiritual memes. What a transition. Can you tell me the story with as much detail as you'd like of like this whimsical journey?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I was a closet poet the whole time is the short answer. But life is full of detours, and we always have plans for our lives, or people have plans for us, and life is a long and winding road, and we often get to where we need to go, but the path there is so unpredictable and full of what look like false turns, but actually just end up being the scenic route to somewhere that you're trying to go. So I grew up in a very, very small town in Southwest Minnesota. And I was just like surrounded by fields and country and nature and books. And I just like had plenty of space to wander both my imagination and my physical self. And so I was always kind of just like tuned into my imagination. I was always kind of living in my imagination as a kid. And in my early teens, that started to express itself through poetry. I started finding like my mom's poetry books around the house and like got really into Edgar Allan Poe, the stuff that, teenagers like for poetry, and eventually started writing my own. And by the end of high school, I had like stacks and stacks and stacks of notebooks that were filled with poetry. And I kind of like wanted to do that. Like nothing interested me in terms of career. I was like, people were starting to apply to colleges and choosing career paths, and nothing felt right to me. And I remember feeling like, well, other people have been poets and they made it work. And like poetry is not just going to die. Like poetry has existed for thousands of years, and there's going to be a way for more poetry to come through, even if it doesn't seem like an obvious career path. And I'm like, kind of like made a promise to myself to pursue that as much as I could in like high school. And again, life happens and like all these things happen. And I ended up like, I was also really into art, and I was always painting and drawing and things like that. I've always kind of been balancing the writing side of, creativity as well as the visual side. And I eventually went to college for art school because I'm like, well, I need to go to college for something, because I was just trying to write and it just wasn't working out. I'm like, I need to get myself together. Went to art school and ended up becoming a professional graphic designer. So I kind of like snuck into the business world through the back door as like an artist. So I was working in like advertising agencies and stuff like that as a graphic designer. And I was making logos and I was making, websites and, things like that. And that kind of established me as like a professional, like a creative professional. And art wasn't as fun when you had to do it like professionally. So I ended up just like trying to pivot and being more of like doing the thinking behind the design, which was more like on the strategy side. So I just kind of repositioned myself and like created a story about me being a strategist, and it just kind of worked. And the next thing you know, I'm working professionally as like a strategist, and I'm like consulting with businesses on like digital strategy.
Someone say you manifested that.
I totally manifested it. Like I had no business doing that.
Yeah. I think that's actually what manifesting is. Just as an aside, is like it's really deciding first, like deciding it, definitively claiming it and trying it on as a feeling inside your body, and like being willing to receive it before we can even allow any of the infinite possibilities or chance happenings to occur. Because if our minds are shut down to an idea, it's not going to happen for us.
Mm-hmm.
We're not going to look for it.
Absolutely. So I just, from like being like a struggling writer to then jumping into being like an art school student, then to being like a professional graphic designer, and then now I'm like a professional strategist. And it was like a few just like weird jumps that I didn't plan for when I went to art school, but that eventually led me to being a strategist. And but no matter what I was doing, I was always writing, whether I was blogging or like just writing things on the side. I was always writing behind the scenes, and even strategy in a lot of ways is like you're creating stories for clients. There is a creative aspect and a written aspect where you're kind of trying to sell the client on a certain vision. So it was a lot of good practice to create and sell visions to clients, and it was a unconventional way of refining my skills as a writer and communicator.
Mm-hmm.
And fast forward deep into my strategy career, I ended up writing my first book, which was Shit Your Ego Says, which was really a kind of about what I was learning in terms of like being an artist at heart, living inside in this professional world and trying to navigate it with mindfulness and trying to navigate it with as much of a heart-centric approach as I could, and realizing all of the ego chatter that's in my head and identifying it and trying to reconnect with my intuition. So the book Shit Your Ego Says came out of just that whole experience. And that was published through Hay House. And that kind of got me like a footing in the world as being an author.
How did you get published by Hay House? I mean,
I manifested it.
Oh, come on.
I did. So
okay, tell me the story. Because that's the dream for a spiritual writer. It's like Hay House is where it's at. So you're a completely unpublished author at this point? Or?
Unpublished, and I didn't have any type of online platform.
Okay. This is fascinating.
I had, probably a couple hundred Instagram followers.
Stop.
And my Instagram was just personal. It wasn't marketing or...
I'm dying of suspense.
So the key was having a really good book. Like I knew, when this book, I've always had book ideas, and then you kind of think them through and you're like, well, that's not so great. I can see some flaws in that. When this book idea came to me, it was the first one where it was like, that's it. That's the book I'm going to write. It made sense. I could visualize it existing. I could visualize myself writing it. So even before I had started writing it, I made a commitment to writing it and getting it published because it just felt like the right book for me.
Yeah.
And so I just started writing it, and I had no plans of how I would get it published. I just knew that I needed to write it. And conventional wisdom in publishing will tell you that you need to build up your platform first. And then once you have a good enough platform, then you can maybe start pitching books. I didn't know that because I knew nothing about the publishing world. I just knew that this book needed to be written and it needed to come out. So I just focused every day on writing it, like before and after work, and every day I'd be writing it. And eventually I was like more than halfway through writing the book. And I'm like, okay, fine, I'm going to put together a book proposal now. So I just like put together a book proposal based on all the chapters I'd already written.
And how'd you figure out how to do that?
I think I just looked it up. I think I just looked it up online. Like,
I love this story. It's so casual.
How to write a book proposal, and I just like took what made the most sense to me.
Right.
And I was used to like creating like PowerPoint presentations, for work. So I knew how to like tell a story through, pages and through like some kind of a presentation. So I just used my own kind of creativity mixed with the advice I found online, really.
Mm-hmm.
And I just made like a proposal, and I started shipping it out to any agents I could find online.
Yeah.
All of which rejected me or didn't even respond to my emails. Like I got dozens of no responses, dozens of rejections, like no consideration. Because again, I was completely unknown. And at one point during that process, I had shared my proposal with my friend, Jake, who was living in Maui at the time. And just to get his feedback, And then at some point, Jake was like working with a friend in the UK, and they were like, his friend had a book idea that they were pitching to Hay House in the UK. And I think that his friend's book got rejected, but that process put Jake in touch with Hay House in the UK. And without me telling him to, or without him telling me, he took the liberty of sending my proposal to Hay House in the UK.
This is incredible.
Right. And Hay House UK got my book proposal. They loved it. They sent it to Hay House in New York. And then I'm just like at work one day. I had no idea this was happening.
What?
And then I get an email from like the head of acquisitions at Hay House saying like, we have your proposal. We love it. We want you to come in for a meeting.
What?
Yeah.
And you're like,
Just
you're
like
reading
that.
this email being like, I never even sent that.
Correct.
Wow. What a feeling.
Correct.
What did you feel in that moment?
It just like,
oh, come on.
Just kind of disbelief a little bit,
yeah,
right?
Totally.
Just kind of like, what? Like,
I would be freaking out. That's so exciting.
It was. But then like the next day I went in to meet with Hay House, and like their head of acquisitions was like, she said, this is the best book proposal I've ever seen.
Wow.
Yeah. And she's like, if you had a platform, we would publish this tomorrow. If you had a platform. She's like, we love this book. We want to publish you. You don't have anything close to a platform. So she gave me a book on building my platform, and she like gave me some tips, and she like sent me off into the world. Then like a few days later, she sends me another email and she's like, listen, we've got a conference coming up in Chicago. And it's called like the Movers and Shakers Conference. And it's a big conference we do. And at the end of the conference, we award a book proposal to one person. And she's like, it's like a $7,000 conference, but I want to send you there for free.
Wow.
So she sends me to this Hay House conference, and I'm like partying in Chicago with all these like Hay House folks for like the weekend. And then at the end, like I like submit my proposal for consideration to the contest, and I was accepted as the winner, and I was awarded a book proposal.
This is like the epitome of just like divine alignment. Like you can't make this shit up. It's just like something had your back on all of this. I mean, that's the way I see it. But like, how do you explain this?
Yeah.
Other than having a badass book proposal.
Yeah, that's key. I mean, I think like quality will always shine through. Like, and one of the things she told me when I was meeting with her the first time, she's like, you're a real writer. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, well, what do you mean? Yeah, of course, I'm here to write a book. She's like, no, but you know, at Hay House, we don't really have real writers. Huh. Do you know what I mean? Like in the self-help world, there's a lot of great teachers, speakers, thinkers, but they're not like writers. Right. So like she acknowledged that like, here I am, like I'm like a quote unquote real writer, like in the self-help world. And she was just like, that's a rarity. And she's like, that's cool. That's great. That makes your book really good. Yeah. So the fact that I spent so much time, like I didn't write this as like a way to promote my, you know, like speaking events. Right. You know, I wrote it, I put all my love and energy into writing the best book I could. Like literally I would put care into massaging every sentence and paragraph because I wanted it to sing as if it was, because I came from, again, like poetry background, right? So I wanted to write a nonfiction book that had like a rhythm and to it. So that is first and foremost, is just like when you put that much love and energy into like crafting something that's, you know, just like has an artfulness to it, it goes a long way. And then, yeah, I mean, I agree. I think there was a lot of divine intervention to set that up.
Wow. That is such an interesting story. I love every single part of that. I'm curious for you because now, of course, we talked about your spiritual memes taking over the internet and your poetry's mixed in there too. Mm-hmm. But when did this spirituality component come in for you? Because you could have been writing memes about anything and making little cartoons about anything. And, you know, you had that background again as a strategist. It's like, I'm trying to connect the dots. Was it something that existed and danced in you from the moment that you were born, this innate spirituality, or was it lit on fire by the words and the souls of poets that you adored growing up? What do you think?
Yeah, all of the above. I was, you know, growing up in a small town in Minnesota, it was very much a Christian kind of like place. So I was always going to church and things like that. And the Christianity pieces of that didn't stick for me, but the sense of having a relationship with God, source, the universe, whatever you want to call it, that always stayed. So I remember, like, ever since I was very young, feeling like a personal connection with, in growing up in Christianity, you do kind of personify it as God, which is like a figure. And I don't believe that's kind of what it is.
Right.
But as a kid, I kind of saw things through that lens where, like, there's this God that's like not a man or woman, but is just like a being that's there to protect us and guide us, whether that is your own guides or your own higher self, like whatever you want to call it now. But I always felt that connection. And I remember, like, being in church one day as a kid and being like, I'm pretty sure that God is real and that God exists, but I don't think he's here, like, stuck between these walls of this church and this is where he lives. Like,
Right.
I was like, I don't quite buy that. So I kind of, like, I didn't throw out the baby with the bathwater, right? I kind of, like, discarded the parts of the Christian religion that didn't resonate with me, but I always carried with me the idea of there being just a higher power in the universe. And then the artists that I tended to gravitate towards, especially people like Allen Ginsberg and Walt Whitman. I mean, I feel like there's a lot of scripture that gets expressed through poetry. Because I feel like the role of the poet is to tap into some kind of muse that's out there and be a channel to communicate that with the world.
Yes.
And there's so many poems like Song of Myself by Walt Whitman, which is just totally a scripture of the holiness of being alive.
Yeah.
So
and
for
like
me, a lot of
love song to nature too.
Exactly.
Yeah.
For me, it's like reading Walt Whitman is like reading the Bible without any religious connotations. So I feel like I was just introduced to this idea of, like, the muse. So I feel like I'm like, I don't put a lot of, like, thinking or pre-planning into the memes I make. Like, I feel like I'm in some kind of creative collaboration with some spirit.
Right.
So, like, my job in this collaboration is to, like, tune in to whatever, like, muse or spirit is out there that's trying to communicate. My job is to tune into that and then express it in a way that is most as effective as I can.
So you're channeling memes.
Exactly. No, like, literally.
I love this.
Like, literally.
Yeah.
Like, I'll see, like, a meme template. Like,
Can you please put that in your Instagram bio? Just meme channeler.
Yes, I love it. It says meme poet now, but meme channeler is probably more accurate.
That's so okay. So can you walk me through this? Like, your page is full of very funny, very interesting, very pithy, thoughtful, thought-provoking memes. And I'm now trying to conjure up an image of, like, the lightning bolt of wisdom that's striking you at the top of the head throughout your day from this ephemeral being that's channeling you these memes. Can you, like, walk me through what that looks and feels like for you when these messages are coming through? Because the reason I ask is there's probably other people out there listening that have messages from the universe or God source that are trying to get through to them, but they might not be recognizing exactly what that looks like and how to slow down and catch them.
Yeah, 100%. So I'm kind of the belief that there are a lot of ideas just kind of floating out there in the ether. And it's beyond me to know where they come from or whether they're spirits or my spirit guides or my higher self or God or, like, whatever it is, aliens. Like, there's a million ways you could describe it, but I'm pretty convinced that there are messages out there in the universe that we can tune in to, like, antennas to receive messages. So for me, like, the most important thing is to put myself in a place of receptivity. So I'm really interested in the kind of intersection of consciousness and creativity. And that's the first step, is to become like a receiver for the messages,
Right.
which means for me, early in the morning, not early in the morning, but just first thing for me, like before all the day, like activities start to kind of take over.
Infiltrate, yeah.
You need to carve out some space. And I have my yerba mate, something softer than coffee to get me started, just to kind of like ease me into waking up. And I really just put on some nice, instrumental music and try to tune in to the universe. Like whether that's through, it's almost like a meditation, but you're not like telling yourself not to think. You're just tuning into whatever materializes in the ether that brings your attention toward it.
So your eyes are closed. You're listening to this music.
Yeah.
Or your eyes open?
That doesn't even have to be closed. I might just be like, just sitting there, like
do you have your pen?
Looking around. Yeah, usually have an open notebook and a pen. And I'm just like chilling, like listening to some tunes, drinking some yerba mate, just trying to like sense, where am I at? What am I feeling right now? What's on my mind? But in a soft way where it's like, not like what's really on my mind, but like what's behind what's on my mind.
Yeah.
What's like way in the background? What's like,
right.
What am I sensing? Where do I feel tension in my energy?
Yeah.
What lesson am I learning right now at this point in my life? What's been, you know what I mean?
Ooh, that's a good one.
You just tune into all these things. Like, where am I at? Just where am I at?
Yeah.
What's happening to me? What lessons am I learning? What's the universe trying to tell me?
Right. It's like that question is like, I picture watching a movie of your own life and being like, what is this part about?
100%.
You know what I mean? Like trying to figure out what is the character going through, but like removing yourself from that enough to be a little pragmatic. And it's like, oh, it looks like that person's learning about boundaries right now, or,
exactly.
Or following their heart.
That's a great way of putting it. So I'm really just not trying to like grab any idea or grasp at how can I make this meme. I'm really just sensing where I'm at. And then it just starts to articulate into an idea. And there might just be like a rough idea, like it might be around just like slowing down and being gentler to yourself. And then I'm like, okay, there's a concept, but how can I express that concept?
Right.
And then it could end up being like a poem. It could end up being an illustration. It could end up being a meme. Like, I find that different concepts are best expressed through different mediums. So I have all these mediums that I can work in.
Yeah.
And some things just work great as a meme. I think something might be a little bit more like, oh, I actually have a thoughtful, serious point I want to make. So I'm going to write up a mini poem or a mini little Instagram essay to express this, because meme, this isn't something I want to joke about. I want to express this seriously.
Right.
But some things are fun to express with some irreverence and humor.
That's what I love about your page too, is it's so versatile. It's so varied and there's so much depth, but there's also so much humor. And it's like, you don't find that often. Usually it's a page all about being funny and maybe being crass or making people just getting a cheap laugh, or it's like very heavy, spiritual, dogmatic dharma. And yours is just this gorgeous space in between.
Thank you so much. And I don't think that spirituality and humor are exclusive from each other, right? And I think that humor is the highest form of spirituality, in a way, because it's all a divine comedy, and we need to enjoy. Like, laughter is it's a expression of enjoying our ride through life and laughing in the waves and during the storm. So I feel like, things like dancing and laughing, like, that's my kind of spirituality.
What do you do in particular? You just mentioned dancing, laughing, but like, what else do you do when you are feeling a little bit heavy?
I mean, for me, moving the body is so important. Like, I think so much tension and stress gets stored physically inside of us.
Right.
And it needs a release. Like, you can only do so much with your mind. Like, I love to read and write and listen to music and like watch a documentary. And like, I very much still live in the mind as much as I try not to. But there's only so much the mind can do to solve the problems that the mind created. At a certain point, you need to bring it to a physical level.
So true.
And I don't dance enough, but even just doing a little dance party around the house.
Do you like a static dance?
I do. It's been a minute.
Do you wanna go tomorrow?
Yeah, this is at the I know this one.
Temple of the
Sacred Womb. I saw that.
It's dope. My friend, shout out to Matt Zian, who's also a podcaster. He DJs there.
Cool. Are you going?
I think so.
I'm
You're
down.
invited.
I'm down.
Okay.
I thought about it. I'm
Okay.
going to the solstice party there.
Okay.
Next week, I think.
Yeah, those are good too.
Cool. Yeah. Static dance and just I love yoga. I do running, and it's the best way to just instantly switch your energy.
Yeah.
Sweat it out,
Mhm.
move your body. So important.
So important. What's your favorite thing that you've written, channeled, drawn, or like a meme that you've created lately that you saw it, you felt it, you heard it, and you're like, fuck yeah, this one's good?
That's funny. It's the ones that I think are really good aren't always the most popular.
Okay, tell me one that you really thought it was good, and then tell me one that's been really popular.
Well, what's really popular now is, have you seen the new account I started called Starseed AF?
No, but that is so you and so perfect. Is it exploding?
Yeah. So like I decided just like, I was like randomly, I was like stoned one night.
Yeah.
Because that's another thing. So in the morning, having some nice tea and quiet music, and like that's a good way to channel.
Yeah.
In the evening, and having like an edible,
Yeah.
and listening to music, that's another way.
Yeah.
And different kinds of ideas come out.
Definitely.
In different places.
What kind of music? Sorry, in the evening with your edible?
In the evening, it's more just like fun stuff. Like it could be hip hop. It could be like Bob Dylan. It could be like R&B. Like that's when it gets crazy. That's when it gets, or like jazz or something.
Yeah.
But more lively than my morning music for sure. But I was just like really stoned one night, and I just like thought like, oh, it'd be funny if there was an Instagram account called Starseed AF.
That is so good.
And just do like this whole idea of like 5D consciousness.
Right.
But like take that to like
over the top,
an extreme, and like be like sassy 5D consciousness. So it's like the bio is like high vibe bad bitch. And then it just says memes from the fifth dimension.
Dude, that's good.
So that's just like my unhinged like spirituality page. And like what's fun about it is I'm playing a character.
Yes.
Like I realized like, how can I use Instagram as an art form? Like I'm already doing it to share memes and poetry, but like, what if I use the platform as an art form in a new way? Like such as like, imagine if someone writes a novel, there's like characters in that novel.
Yeah.
So like I could write a novel that has like a female lead character, and then like I create this character and opinions and a lifestyle and a way of life.
Yeah.
Through this character. So I'm like, well, can I do that with Instagram? So like I created there's just kind of a loose character where it's like this female, like high vibe, bad bitch who's like spiritual, but also really sassy.
Yeah.
And she like is spiritual, but she'll still like talk shit. And like, you can tell she's not fully integrated because she's a little too sassy about her spirituality. But, for me, it's just because there's no ego to it. Because with shit your ego says, or sorry, that's my old Instagram name, but with words are vibrations, there's not a lot of ego in it, but just from the perspective that it's still me sharing my thoughts and my ideas, it still is ego in the sense that I'm trying to communicate what I believe, more or less.
Right. There's somewhat of your own narrative.
It's still like a bit of my own narrative. But with Starseed AF, I'm completely liberated from my own narrative. So I'm free to create like I'll post things. It doesn't matter if I personally believe it or not,
Right.
because it's coming from the point of view of the character.
Right. It's like this creative confetti you're just throwing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's liberating. And like on that page, like I'll post like 5 times a day just because it's so like
Fun.
it's just fluid, and like I won't care as much about what I post.
Right.
And already that page, I'm getting posts there that have more engagement than anything I've posted on Words Are Vibrations.
Wow. Wow.
Because it's a specific niche of people that really connect with it. There's
Totally.
like a certain tribe that it's tapped into, and they just kind of go crazy for it.
That's so fun.
It's
That's
fun.
so fun.
It's just, that's what it is. It's just fun. It's like, hey, this makes me laugh. This is fun. I'm just going to post it. And that there's something liberating about that creatively.
Your other account, the name of it is Words Are Vibrations. And I wanted to ask you why you chose that handle and what's the story or what's the concept behind that?
The story, like all of these, it was completely random and not thought out. Like everything in my life.
It's such a good name though.
So my name on Instagram was Shit Your Ego Says for years, because that was the name of my book.
Right.
And around this time last year, it was like summer 2020. So in the middle of the pandemic, I started to feel a little bit confined by the name Shit Your Ego Says, because like it seems like, okay, that was the name of my book. Fine. I'm not really promoting that book as much anymore. My identity is not built around that book. So I need to like evolve. I need to break out of that version of me and like find what's next.
Yeah.
So I had that sense. And I didn't want to post only about, this shit your ego says, because already like you're putting out vibrations about the ego and the shit the ego says, and it's already has like a negative connotation to it.
Mm-hmm.
So I just felt constricted by that name. And honestly, like I was like playing around with Twitter, which I've since been banned from Twitter, by the way. I've been kicked off Twitter.
Wait, what?
I do not know why.
You don't know why?
They did not give me a reason.
One of the people who got shadow banned.
Not even shadow banned. Straight suspended. And now like anytime I start a new account, they immediately suspend it.
Twitter canceled you.
Yes. And I'm like, I post poetry and memes. Like, really?
Yeah, they feel your agenda.
It's really going, yeah, they went really hard. But at the time, and I still have some under the radar Twitter accounts, but
okay.
Jack Dorsey, if you're listening to this.
Just kidding.
I don't. I actually don't. But
wait, how can they suspend every account that you start? Like, is it IP address?
I have made up new email addresses and then started Twitter accounts from the new email address. Or I've even used my fiance's email address to start a Twitter account.
Yeah.
As soon as I start using that account on my phone, they suspend it.
Dude, that's creepy.
It's really creepy. So the only Twitter accounts I'm able to use now are Twitter accounts that I had years ago. So like somehow they're like grandfathered in and they're not like on, because I think it's an algorithm that is doing the blocking.
Got it.
So because I have a couple like really old Twitter accounts, they're not on the radar of the algorithm.
Huh.
So those are the only ones I can use. I cannot start new ones.
Wow.
It's wild, right?
Very.
But I was playing around on Twitter and like just trying to find my voice there. And literally, I think I remember when this happened, I was just like walking from one room to another. And I was like, oh, Words Are Vibrations. And I changed my Twitter name to that. And it was like, there wasn't one single thought put into it. It was just like, oh, I'm going to change it to this. Because it was low stakes on Twitter that I didn't have a following.
Right.
So I could just try things. And it just, after a couple days later, it felt so right that I just like, hey, maybe I could do this on Instagram. And I just changed it on Instagram. Wow. And it's so funny because there was no plan, there was no thought behind it. And now in hindsight, it's like, it's the perfect name for like the messages I want to put out into the world.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So I just like, that's what I mean just by like tuning into your own intuition and just trusting what comes through and not overanalyzing everything.
Completely. I mean, that's the name of this show. The Thought Room was the same thing. It was like, a note that I had written to myself in my ayahuasca journal about integration. There was a vision I had about the experience of being inside of different thought rooms and what happens when you're observing the thought and the thought has a vibration. Those words have a vibration that resonate your body like a tuning fork. And your bones are actually rattling with the vibration of the thought that you have perpetuated. And to become conscious, to create more thoughts that are voluntary thoughts, that's what it means to me to be conscious. And so this concept of the thought room was the idea that if you don't like the experience inside your body, like we're talking about the heaviness or density or just frustration, that's when we have to go, what thought is playing on the record of my mind right now? Because that's sending that reverberation through my bones and my beingness. So then I need to switch the channel on my thoughts. And once I do that, just reaching for a slightly better feeling thought. Like I'm not saying you have to go from anguish and despair and anger to absolute elation. But if you can just take one little step up on the consciousness scale and reach for a slightly better feeling thought, it will change your experience of reality. So that's why we named this show The Thought Room.
It is the same idea as words vibrations. I love that. It's like the thought, the tiny seed of the thought that is planted ends up creating a whole room that you're living in.
Completely.
Yeah.
Completely. And the size of that room and the feel of that room all has to do with how expansive the thought itself is. Because you used the word before, constricting, like, oh, this was feeling constricting, this was feeling constricting. That means that the thoughts around that event or person or thing felt tight, made your body feel heavy, made you feel drained. That's what I'm talking about. That's the thought room. And that's when we need to wake up and empower ourselves to choose something different. And it sounds like that's what you've done with your life. And that's why you've been able to draw in these incredible people and events and opportunities, just paying rapt attention to that voice.
Yeah, I love it. And you too, and so many. Like I feel like the more that I am on this journey, the more I find soul tribe that are going through all the same stuff and coming to all the same conclusions and all the same realizations. And it's just been magical to just, for some reason, especially here in Austin, just stumbling across all of these beautiful souls that are on similar journeys in life and dealing with the same kind of things and coming to the same realizations. Life is truly magical when when it comes down to it.
Truly. Truly.
And I love those ayahuasca downloads too, that a lot of wisdom there too.
Totally. I can't remember if I asked you this question specifically, but have you sat with ayahuasca? Because before we hit record, we are talking about another medicine journey that you just had, and you're welcome to dive into that at all if you wish to, or any of your other experiences. But, we talk a lot about plant medicine on this show, and I'd be happy to go into that with you.
Yeah. I've sat with Aya like 6 times. Never exposed to any plant medicines until I moved to New York City, because just like living in Minnesota, even in Minneapolis, like it just wasn't around, at least with my friends. So like I had a vague awareness of it, but it just wasn't on the table. Like once in a while, like my friend would be like, "Oh, I had mushrooms at a party the other night." And like he was like, "I was crying in the bathroom floor." I was like, "Oh,
like, that sounds terrible."
Yeah, so they were kind of around, I guess, but like not used in a responsible setting. To say nothing of like a sacred setting. But in New York, and also through podcasting. Like I moved to New York like right when podcasts were really starting to become a thing. And through the combination of those things where like you can listen to podcasts where people are talking about things that you've never been exposed to.
Right.
And then living in New York City where you're suddenly introduced to things that you would never before be introduced to.
Totally.
It really just kind of blows you open.
It blew me open for sure. For sure. One of the wildest places I've ever been.
Yeah. So I just started to put the intention. And one thing I heard on an early podcast. I have no idea who said it, but they were like, someone was like, people ask me like, how can I do ayahuasca? Because
Yeah.
it's still hard to find, but it's a lot easier to find than it used to be 10 years ago.
Mm.
And this person just said like, if this interests you, just put the energy out into the universe. Just just ask for it. It's not something you can force. Like don't go knocking on doors and be like, do you know where I can find ayahuasca? Like just open yourself up to the possibility of it finding you.
Right.
And it'll happen when it's meant to happen. When you're ready to be invited into the presence of Mother Aya, you will be welcomed in.
Yes.
So that's just kind of what happened to me.
Mm-hmm.
And so Aya specifically, I did Aya for the first time in October of 2016.
Mm-hmm.
And did it a couple times, did it 3 times in New York City, and then I went to Peru in 2019 and did it 3 times in Peru over the course of a week.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, it's definitely an experience. It's a very powerful, and it's different for everyone. It's not as intense for everyone as it is for some people, but there's always a lot to uncover about the nature of yourself and the nature of the world.
Yeah. If you could titrate one of your most potent teachings from ayahuasca that, again, like resonated in you, moved in you at such a deep level that you never forgot it, can you share a piece of wisdom from those experiences with us?
So the most profound, like,
did she talk to you in memes, ayahuasca?
Yeah, well, like basically David Bowie saved me from the apocalypse is like the short story.
Okay.
That's kind of a meme.
Yeah.
I mean, so I don't experience things as intensely as some people, just having spoken to enough people. Like I don't really go to other worlds or universes as much as some people. Like my experiences tend to be a little more on the grounded side.
Cool.
And I experience things through just kind of metaphors and visual stories that kind of play out in my imagination.
Okay.
So they're a little more grounded, I think, than most people's. But the most profound experience I had was in Peru. The last night of the first 2 nights in Peru were very mild, and I barely had much of a psychedelic experience because sometimes you don't. The third night is when that all changed. And the story that kind of started to play out in my head was that I basically saw myself caught up in all of the wars and battles throughout human history. Because like when you think about it, we all carry all the baggage of our ancestors.
Yeah.
And, when I think about just like it's both for men and women, but when you look at the male lineage of human history and like all the wars and battles that have been fought, that's like stored in your DNA.
Yeah.
Like, especially because people in the past did not have this access to the same therapy, plant medicine, healing.
Can you unpack
that we have
that
now
for people? Because I'm in full agreement with you, but some people out there might be listening going, what does he mean it's stored in our DNA? The trauma is stored in our DNA. Like I never knew those people who were my ancestors.
Mm-hmm. You didn't know them, but your DNA did.
Uh-huh.
DNA is passed from person to person.
Right.
And like DNA stores information.
Right.
And it stores good information, like how to do certain things.
And how to avoid other things.
It also stores trauma.
Yeah.
And part of it is not even, part of it could be like actual trauma that's like physically stored in the DNA that's physically passed. That could be it. And it also could be how we're raised, because like our parents were raised a certain way because their parents were raised in a certain way because their parents were raised in a certain way. So in a way it is on the cellular DNA level, but it's also just habitual what we're taught.
So it's nature and nurture.
I think so.
Yeah.
but we're all just passing down trauma.
Right.
And we do our best to heal it generation by generation.
Right.
And I think this generation that we're in now is doing an amazing job healing ancestral trauma that's been passed down to us.
Yeah.
And we finally have the tools to deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. Like, I've heard this before, but you know, like when a female baby is born, her body possesses all of the cells that will become all of the eggs. Like, she's born with all of the eggs that she will ever have in that lifetime. And there's a finite number of eggs. So if you think about that, it's like, it's an unbroken line from mother to mother to mother to mother to mother to mother since the beginning of time.
Exactly.
That's really wild.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was all of this, just like, I felt all of this baggage, whether it's like in my DNA or just psychically, that has been carried through mankind, especially on the male side, and all of the battles that have been waged in the name of who knows what. And it felt like there was all of these battles happening all around me, and I was caught up in them all. And it was just like, not fun, you know? And it was so funny because this is just how things happen to me. Of all things, David Bowie appeared to like get me out of there.
I love
and
this.
like the message that, and this was all like not spoken verbally, but like the message that I received from his presence. And David Bowie was like actually like a mystic and a magician, and like he was tapped into the esoteric world. So like if anyone's gonna just pop up into an ayahuasca vision, it's like him. It's like, you imagine like him in the labyrinth just like popping up and as this like magical creature. Like that's what happened.
That's a dope vision.
I know, it's amazing. I have a Bowie tattoo actually.
That's so cool.
Yeah,
Yeah, I see that.
Because my guides are artists and poets and things like that.
Cool.
So Bowie is one of them. And
do you pray to them, like these artists and poets?
No, I just listen to their music, but like
that's kind of like a prayer.
Yeah, like I feel like no, I don't pray to them, but I do have I have an altar, like a kind of a mini altar in my office, and I do have like an original 1965 first edition vinyl of Bob Dylan's Highway 61 Revisited on my altar.
Nice.
Just because, for some people they might have Neem Karoli Baba as a guide,
right,
which is awesome, or Ram Dass.
Right.
And those are my guides as well. But Bob Dylan also happens to be a guide for me.
That's
and
perfect.
I wouldn't be here today without being influenced by people like David Bowie and Bob Dylan.
Yeah.
So of course, David Bowie, my guide, pops up to rescue me from this apocalypse happening all around me. And the message was, because David Bowie, throughout his career as an artist, was always reinventing himself. And every album, he would be a new person and a new persona. And he would give himself new names, whether it's Ziggy Stardust or Aladdin Sane or the Thin White Duke. He always had personas that he would play.
Yeah.
I guess kind of like what I do with Starseed AF. He was doing that with like Ziggy Stardust, maybe.
Yeah.
It's a character he would play. So the message that he came to kind of guide me with was that you don't have to be this anymore. Like, okay, like, yes, you have ancestral trauma and baggage and pain from generations that has been passed down to you, and every generation just kind of got caught up in that same narrative and like got caught up in that same karmic wheel of of trauma. And he's like, you can just become someone new. You don't have to continue this narrative. You can just set down the baggage and reinvent yourself and just leave it behind. And like, don't fight for anything. Just instead of fighting for something, just create something and be that and create a new vision and live that vision. And that's it. And coming from him, it just seems so simple and easy. Just become someone new.
Yeah.
Leave it behind.
Wow.
And that completely saved me from the whole apocalypse that was happening around me. And then after that, the rest of the night was just this amazing, expansive, beautiful.
Wow. Because you let go.
experience. I completely let go and surrendered to it.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
That is so powerful. So powerful. Thank you for sharing that story.
Mm-hmm.
I want to ask you, and this is something we don't really talk about often on this show, but I want to ask you about aliens and extraterrestrial.
I like it.
Yes, your face just lit up because I know you do a lot of alien and extraterrestrial memes, and I saw one the other day that was like the homesick alien in me
recognizes the homesick
alien in you. I was like, that's dope. That's really funny. And so tell me about your thoughts, feelings, beliefs on this. And this has been something I've started to ask people about. I just had another friend on the show who was a unified physicist, and I got his opinion on extraterrestrials because of the disclosures that have been happening from the Pentagon. And so I want to playfully bring this up in conversation and get some of your feedback.
Wow. Yeah. I don't have specific beliefs about aliens. I have a character that I draw illustrations of that's a little like sad alien.
Uh-huh.
And my Instagram is full of them. And for me, it's more like a representation of myself and maybe like people like you and others who don't maybe quite feel at home in this body on this planet.
Yeah.
Because this is like a high density planet with a lot of, you've got to kind of, to a degree, struggle to survive. You need to like work and just to afford food and lodging. And it's not if you could imagine any possible universe, this is certainly not the worst, but it's also not the best.
Right.
So I just kind of feel like within myself and with so many people that I know, like, even though I have an account called Starseed AF, I don't really quite know what a starseed is, but like, I think it's the same idea of like someone whose like soul is from another dimension, galaxy, and we don't quite fit in here on planet Earth.
Yeah.
And so when I use aliens, I kind of use them as a metaphor to discuss our own alienation in a planet that is not governed by love. So when I say the homesick alien in me recognizes the homesick alien in you, it's just to say that like, this is not our home. Like this is our home now for this lifetime. We're here for whatever reason, but ultimately we're all kind of homesick for a more perfect union with each other and with ourselves and with source. And we're all kind of feeling a little bit homesick for that place.
Right.
So when I draw aliens, it's more like that concept. Like we're all aliens here in this weird planet that is like this 3D matrix that we're all kind of, you could say we're stuck in, or you could say that we've chosen to reincarnate here for a particular reason.
Yeah.
But either way, it's just a way to poke fun at, instead of getting, getting like shaking your fist and feeling victimized by being stuck inside the matrix.
Yeah.
And all the conspiracies that are happening all around us. It's just a way to poke fun at that and be like, we're all just homesick aliens.
Yeah.
And like it kind of lightens the story a little bit when you look at it that way. But there are certainly aliens at the same time. And I don't know what they are. I get a sense that like, I don't think that anything that happens on Fox News per se is very legitimate. So like when Fox News is talking about aliens, I would be a little suspicious around the motivation of that.
I would say just stop watching the news.
Well, 100%.
To anyone who hasn't made that switch already.
100%. But a lot of this quote unquote disclosure that's happening this year is being put out through, the corporate media platforms.
Right.
Which makes me a little suspicious around it. Like, is it just a distraction? Like so many other distractions that have been in the media to put our attention away from X, Y, or Z?
Right.
Is it a way to perpetuate fear?
Mhm.
Just in the same way that after 9/11 and all the terrorism fear that was being spread in mainstream media.
Mhm.
I'm not saying that's what that's what's happening, but I would be suspicious around
Completely.
mainstream narratives.
Isn't it such a strange time? I mean, I was just reflecting. I can't remember if it was today or yesterday, but I had this thought that was like, oh, this is sad. We cannot trust the news ever again. Like this, a precedent has now been set that there's too many conflicting stories. Things are feeling eerie. People are trying very, very hard to get a certain point across, and they don't want people to ask questions. And the people that ask questions are getting canceled and gaslit.
Or kicked off Twitter.
And that's never happened before. Like we've at least been able to express ourselves and call each other idiots online if we wanted to. But now people are not even being allowed to post on Reddit about certain things, and threads are getting removed. And it's like, so I had this thought like, wow, this is the era of news being a trustworthy source is over.
Yeah.
I don't know if it ever really was, to be honest, but like I think back to being a kid and whatever on the news was like, oh, this thing happened and the whole world's sad over it. And yeah, it's just like such a weird time.
Yeah, I think there's like a ongoing, I don't want to say battle. You could say battle, you could say dance, you could say balance between the light and the shadow here on this planet that's been happening for a long time. And the internet has made it so much easier for people to spread information. And I think that there are a lot of people waking up to the kind of just the prevailing power structures and hierarchies and supporting narratives to keep existing control structures in place, and people are waking up to that. And I think that there's a scramble on the side of people that would rather keep us in the dark to squash that awakening.
Right. And you're making me think of what it seems like the thread or the theme of this podcast has been, which is the idea that words are vibrations. And I want to bring in the invitation for discernment and using, again, the body as that vibrational tuning fork. So trusting when you hear something, if it doesn't feel right, if you don't want to be reading it, if you don't want to be consuming it, you're not being ignorant to current events if you decide to turn off the news. I always trust that someone's going to tell me if something really, really, really important happens in our world. I'm going to hear it on the street. I'm going to hear it everywhere.
Yeah.
So that doesn't mean I'm not doing my own research. I'm just not using the news. I'm using peer-reviewed articles and other trusted sources.
Yeah, look, words are truly vibrations, and that works both ways.
Right.
Because poetry, songs, even podcasts can be a way to use the vibration of words to liberate people.
Completely.
To send love, to free people's minds. But you can use words vibrationally to imprison people mentally. And when things like the news, and even like nothing against lawyers, because there's a lot of lawyers that are great people and it's like a good career path to take. So nothing against lawyers, but the way that the legal system is structured today is the use of language to paint people into boxes.
Yeah.
Like a legal contract is the vibration of words to form a box to kind of put people in.
It's binding, right? It's like almost like a spell.
It's exactly what it is.
It's
a
contract.
Spell. Exactly. So there's just kind of this, I'm kind of realizing that we're all just magicians.
Completely.
And there's there's different kinds of magicians. There's like black magic, and then there's good magic, and
Right.
you can cast spells through the news. I mean, it's called a broadcast, right? It's the broadcasting of a spell.
Yo.
And you spell words, which is
Spelling
why
is
they're a spelling.
Yeah.
So be careful with the vibrations and the spells that are being cast over you.
Right. And this is why we write our intentions too. Like we write down, we make our own intentions, mantras, contracts with the universe
100%.
when we want to manifest. And that's the power of it. And so if you've never done that and you're listening, take a moment, please, to like really write out. And I encourage you to write out with as much positively magnetized emotion as you can, rich with feeling words. Write down your ideal version of the universe. And if you want to write in material things, that's fine. That's great too. But also get really specific about how you feel when you wake up, who's around you. Are you feeling loved? Are you feeling self-confident? How are people on the planet treating each other? How is Mother Nature feeling and being treated by the people on the planet? And get really wildly creative in painting that picture with your words. And I want to invite people into that world.
Design your own thought room
to live in. Your own thought room. That's exactly it. And I love what you said about I just lost my train of thought, so it'll come back if it's meant to. But I was thinking about, again.
And David Bowie was an alien, just for the record. Speaking of those two things.
Did he tell you that in your ayahuasca?
No, he just looks like one.
Oh, I remember now, because we were talking about ayahuasca, and I had an insight, and I don't believe I've ever shared this on the show before, but you were talking about podcasts and this being vibration as well. Words are vibrations. And I knew that, and I've known that. And the messages on this podcast are very sacred to me. And that's why I feel very much like the guests that are meant to be on this podcast, really, they come to me. And that's been my prayer to the universe is whoever is meant to be on this show, help them find me, and we will make that happen. And I will feel it. Like I will feel it in my body when a person is meant to spread their vibration on this show. And one insight that I had on ayahuasca, because again, the show did not exist before my ayahuasca journeys. And I had deep resistance even when that message came through, you're going to speak. I was like, no, I'm not. I have other plans. And when I finally surrendered to it, the insight was leave the vibration pure. Don't edit out. Don't polish these interviews. Don't crunch it with a bunch of filters. Let people hear your voice. Let people hear your voice crack. Let them hear you laugh. Let them hear you cry. We cry a lot on this podcast. Listen to the stories and get in the same room with people was the other insight. And that's why all the interviews on this show, except for one addendum that we did during COVID, every single one has been me sitting next to a person, sharing deeply intimate stories in the same, heart field, coherent space, in close proximity, because there's something so magnetic about that I truly believe reads through and makes this show special, especially in these times where everything is electronic. This is a rarity, and that's why it is so, so, so important to me to do it this way.
Yeah, I love it. I do a lot of podcasts, and very, 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 very few of them are in person.
Yeah.
And it's so much more like we're sharing the same energy right now, right? So we're just kind of more entrained with each other's energy than we would be otherwise.
That's the perfect word, yeah.
And that makes the conversation a lot less forced and
right.
Intellectual, and it's more just kind of like natural.
Totally. Because I can guarantee you that half the interviews I've done, if I did them over Zoom, the people that I was speaking with that cried during their sharing.
No one's crying on Zoom.
No one's crying on Zoom. And I get DMs from people who have listened to the episode saying, "Oh, I've cried along with you on the podcast. I've cried along with you." that can't happen if we're just digitally meeting each other. It really, really, really can't. So, and that's my opinion on it.
I think that's a great service that you're doing, because in this world of increasing isolation, we're lucky to be in Texas, which is not very locked down compared to a lot of the world.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of people have been isolated over the past year.
Yeah.
And to create a space of in-person intimacy and then to broadcast that space, it's a gift.
It is a gift. It's such an honor to be able to do it. Yeah. So, as we come to a close, I want to invite you to connect with yourself, with whatever that ephemeral thing is that sometimes speaks to you and through you. And I want to just open up the floor to you. If there's anything else on your heart that's coming through that wants to be shared today, I would love to hear that. And then after that, if you could tell people where they can find you on the internet and your books and anywhere else you want to send people, we would love that.
Yes. So what wants to come through right now? I'm just feeling like I've just been feeling really like mushy lately. Like I've just been like really into telling my friends that I love them.
Yeah.
And just like leaning into that.
Yeah.
So
are you telling me you love me, James McCrae?
Absolutely. No. Hallie, I love you. I love the listeners.
Yeah.
I love
we love you guys.
And to take that love as a invitation to share it with others as well. And like it's been so just to be able to openly communicate and tell people you love them and to hear it back. And doesn't even have to be your family members. It can just be like it's so fun just to tell friends you love them. Yeah. And I think like maybe like girls have been doing that for a long time and like guys just haven't been.
Right.
But just opening yourself up to doing that, it's just so freeing, and it just like opens you up to a whole nother just kind of like space within yourself. And it, because when we create connections with others, that just broadens our own field. Because we become part of others as well. So the more people you can connect with on that level of intimacy and love, you're only lifting yourself up and helping to lift others up in the process.
Love, that's the spell that we want to cast.
Love is the spell we want to cast.
So that's the word we're going to vibrate.
Absolutely.
All across this universe.
Yeah, on Instagram, I am both Words Are Vibrations and Starseed AF. And my new book of poetry and memes, it's called How to Laugh in Ironic Amusement During Your Existential Crisis.
Excellent.
And it was really born from the insanity of 2020 and 2021. I was really working on a book of kind of nonfiction about like optimizing your career at that point when the pandemic hit. And then once the world turned upside down, I realized like people didn't need a book around how to optimize their career. They needed something much, 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 much more deeper and like richer and meaningful and weird and strange and absurd to match the state of the world. And that's when, just to circle back to poetry, that's when poetry really started coming through me again. And I started writing these just like weird, psychedelic, post-apocalyptic poems that were totally in tune with the state of the world.
I love it.
And then memes and poems were coming out like around this same flavor. And that book is coming out soon.
Yes. Do you have a date for that yet?
No, it's being finalized with the design and packaging of it right now. So it should be out It might be out on pre-order by the time this launches.
Great.
So just look
Keep
it
an
up.
eye out
You can
for
find me
it.
on Instagram. You can look it up on Amazon, but it's going to be out in the very near future.
Excellent. James, thank you so much for coming over today and hanging out. I could talk to you all day long. It's been an absolute pleasure. And I love you, man.
Thanks, Hallie. Love you.